In the far reaches of the Andromeda expanse where stars shimmered like scattered diamonds on black velvet, the small human colony of Elysium 9 drifted silently. It was a quiet place, a fragile jewel floating on the edge of known space. The colony was home to only a few thousand humans, but every person carried the weight of generations. Memories of homes lost, families destroyed, and promises left unfulfilled. Captain Elias Vorn stood alone on the observation deck of the colony's main station. The hum of the engines and the soft chatter of distant communication consoles were the only sounds breaking the stillness. Elias's hands rested on the railing, fingers tracing the cold metal as he stared at the endless stars. Each point of light seemed to whisper a story, some of wonder, some of tragedy, but all of time that had passed since humanity first ventured beyond its cradle. Long ago, humans had settled quietly among the stars. They had traded with alien races, offered their help as mediators, and even fought as mercenaries when needed. But not all interactions had been peaceful. The Zetherians, a proud and ruthless alien species, had once destroyed a fledgling human colony without warning, leaving only silence behind. Generations of humans had mourned the loss. Families had vanished, homes had been burned, and the galaxy had believed humans would simply forget. But humans never forgot. They were patient, slow to anger, but unyielding in their resolve. Elias's ancestors had whispered an oath, a quiet promise that humanity would one day repay the debt owed. That oath had been passed from parent to child, whispered in the dark, written in secret ledgers, and remembered in the hearts of every human who dreamed of the stars. Now, centuries later, Elias felt that promise pressing on him like gravity. Humanity was small, fragile in numbers, but their determination burned brighter than any star. He closed his eyes and whispered, "The galaxy will remember. The day comes. We will repay what is owed." Below him, the colony thrived in quiet, defiance of the vast void. Children laughed in the playgrounds of biodomes, unaware of the history written in blood and tears. Scientists worked tirelessly, designing ships, shields, and engines that no alien had yet imagined. Engineers whispered about weapons, but Elias knew it was not the weapons that made humans feared. It was their courage, their unwillingness to bow, their ability to stand even when everything seemed lost. A sudden alert blinked on the observation console. A Zetherian scout vessel had entered the outer perimeter. The humans had expected it. The Zetherians were curious, arrogant, and dismissive of human capabilities. Most alien races would have attacked immediately, but humans watched, studied, and waited. Every move, every strategy, every weakness was noted. The humans were small, but their patience made them dangerous. Elias's eyes hardened. The scout's presence was a reminder. The galaxy had not forgotten humanity, and humanity had not forgotten the galaxy. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered quietly to his officers, though the fleet was small, hidden, and advanced beyond what the Zetherians could imagine. "We are ready. Not for revenge, but for justice." The night outside was endless, stars twinkling like silent witnesses to the oath humanity had carried for centuries. For every lost home, for every vanished child, for every life taken, humans had waited, and now, as the Zetherian scout drifted unknowingly closer, the galaxy's most patient species prepared to show what it truly meant, to settle a debt. Captain Elias turned from the observation deck and looked at his crew. Their faces reflected the same fire he felt in his chest. They were small, ordinary people, yet the weight of history made them extraordinary. Humanity had no army, no vast empire, no overwhelming power. Yet their courage, their unity, and their refusal to surrender made them a force even the stars would tremble to see. As the warning alarms faded into silence, Elias whispered again, almost to himself, almost as a prayer. "The stars may not know it yet, but soon they will shudder." The Zetherian scout drifted lazily through the void, its polished metal gleaming like a blade in the starlight. Inside, its crew laughed softly, confident that humans were no threat. They had always underestimated them. That arrogance would be their first mistake. Back on Elysium 9, Captain Elias Vorn watched the scouts' movements through the colony's tactical screens. The humans had waited long for this moment. Every detail of the Zetherians' fleet, every strategy they used, had been studied in secret archives over decades. Humans did not strike blindly. They struck with precision, with purpose, and with a justice that burned hotter than fusion cores. Elias turned to his officers, his voice calm but fierce. Today we repay more than debts, we repay memories, we strike for those who cannot strike for themselves. The words hung in the room like a vow. Every crew member understood. They were not just soldiers. They were the living will of humanity. Every heartbeat carried the courage of their ancestors. The fleet moved silently from hidden warp gates, ships emerging like phantoms from the darkness. Sleek human fighters and warships surrounded the Zetherian scout. Their engines hummed quietly, powered by new energy cores designed to punch through even the toughest shields. The humans did not fire indiscriminately. They waited for the perfect moment. When that moment came, it was sudden and devastating. Energy beams ripped through the Zetherian shields, cutting through their defenses like a blade through silk. The scout crew panicked, realizing too late that these humans were unlike any opponents they had faced. The ships of Elysium 9 moved with flawless coordination, each pilot anticipating the enemy's move before it happened. In the cockpit of his fighter, Elias felt the surge of adrenaline that came with battle. But it was not fear that drove him. It was memory. The memory of colonies destroyed, of families lost, of the whispers of the dead who had waited centuries for this day. Every shot fired, every maneuver made, was for them. Humanity was small, but their resolve made them larger than life. The battle was over almost as quickly as it began. The Zetherian scout was destroyed, its fragments drifting silently into the void. The few surviving crew members were captured, trembling in disbelief. They had believed humans would wait, that humans would beg or plead, but humans did not. Humans repaid debts, and humanity had just begun. Back on the observation deck of Elysium 9, Elias watched the aftermath unfold. The stars seemed quieter now, as if watching and remembering the first of many human strikes. Officers reported damage to human ships. It was minimal. Every loss had been anticipated and accounted for. The humans had proven that even a small force, united and determined, could topple those who thought themselves invincible. Yet amidst victory, Elias felt a familiar weight pressing on his shoulders. This was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and the Zetherians were far from defeated. Every victory would bring new challenges, new enemies, and new sacrifices. Still, he felt a flicker of hope. Humanity had acted. The first spark had ignited. The long silence of centuries had ended. Among the colonists, there was quiet celebration. Children ran through the biodomes, unaware of the battle but sensing a new energy in the air. Scientists and engineers worked late into the night, their excitement barely contained. They had done more than destroy a scout. They had proven that humans were no longer prey. Elias walked through the hangar, greeting pilots with quiet pride. Each one carried the same fire in their eyes that he did. They were small. They were human. But in the face of arrogance and cruelty, they were unstoppable. Humanity was not defined by its size or technology. It was defined by its courage, by its refusal to surrender, and by the unbreakable bonds that connected every living human across time and space. That night, Elias returned to the observation deck. The stars shimmered above like silent witnesses to humanity's first act of vengeance. He placed a hand on the cold railing, whispered softly, "This is only the beginning. They will learn soon. Never underestimate a human." And somewhere deep in the void, perhaps even the stars themselves seemed to listen, trembling ever so slightly at the sound of a species finally standing up for itself. The void was quiet now, the echoes of battle fading into the endless stars. On Elysium 9, the colony was alive with a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Human ships had returned victorious, but victory was never without a cost. Pilots limped back with damaged hulls, engineers whispered about the repairs that would take weeks, and medical teams treated the few injured who had risked everything for justice. Captain Elias Vorn walked through the hangar, his boots echoing against the metal floors. He paused often, offering a quiet nod or a hand on a shoulder. Every human here had fought not for fame, not for glory, but for the memory of those lost centuries ago, for the families and colonies destroyed by the Zetherians. Each survivor carried the weight of those memories, and each had contributed to a small but historic act, the first repayment of a long-held debt. In the central chamber of the station, Elias held the Ledger of the Fallen, a heavy book of names written in careful script. It listed every life lost to alien cruelty, every colony erased, every promise broken. He ran his fingers along the pages, tracing names he would never know personally, but whose memories lived on through him and every human present. "We fight, for you," Elias whispered. The words were soft but filled with meaning. They were a vow, a prayer, and a promise all at once. Around him, humans paused, touched by the gravity of their own actions. This fight was more than a battle. It was a declaration that humanity would not bow, would not forget, and would not forgive those who thought them weak. Among the medical teams, the wounded spoke quietly of fear and relief. Pilots recounted the moments when their ships shook under fire, when laser beams passed just inches from their hulls. Yet, despite exhaustion and lingering fear, there was pride in every word. Humans had faced impossible odds and survived. Humans had shown the galaxy a force no one had respected before. Outside the station, children stared at the stars, their eyes reflecting the glow of distant nebulae. They could not yet understand the depth of the debt that had been repaid, the centuries of silent waiting and careful planning. But they felt the change in the air, a quiet, almost magical sense that something larger than themselves had shifted. Humanity had acted, and the galaxy would never be the same. Elias walked into the memorial chamber, a room filled with holograms of human colonies destroyed long ago. Each hologram flickered softly, a ghostly reminder of lives taken too soon. He placed a hand on one of the projections, feeling the emptiness left behind, and whispered, "We remember. We never forget." The memory of lost worlds fueled him, gave him purpose, and strengthened the resolve of all humans around him. Even with victory, Elias knew the path ahead was dangerous. The Zetherians were humiliated, but not yet defeated. Other alien races had watched in silence, curious and cautious, and some began to reconsider their view of humanity. What had seemed like a small, fragile species was proving itself as something far more dangerous, patient, united, and willing to fight for justice, no matter the cost. That evening, as the stars stretched endlessly outside the station, humans gathered quietly to honor their past. Some knelt in silence, some wrote letters they would never send, and some simply held each other, sharing the weight of grief and the spark of hope. In these moments, humanity was strongest, not because of their ships or weapons, but because of their courage, their memory, and their unwillingness to surrender. Captain Elias returned to the observation deck, looking at the stars with a heavy but determined heart. "We have started the repayment," he murmured, "and the galaxy will learn, slowly but surely, that humanity never forgets. We are the voice of the lost, and we will carry them into every star, into every battle, until our debt is fully repaid." Somewhere deep in the void, beyond the reach of even human sensors, the Zetherians reconsidered their arrogance. They had underestimated a species that could survive, endure, and rise stronger after centuries of suffering. The galaxy, too, would soon feel the tremor of humanity's resolve, a tremor born of grief, of memory, and of unbreakable courage. The victory at the Zetherian Scout was only the beginning, yet its ripples spread farther than anyone could imagine. Across the stars, alien empires and councils began to whisper. Reports of a small human fleet destroying a Zetherian ship without mercy, without hesitation, reached distant worlds in mere hours. Where once humans were dismissed as weak and insignificant, now there was fear and curiosity. Captain Elias Vorn stood on the observation deck of Elysium 9, his eyes tracing the paths of distant stars. He could feel it, the shift in the galaxy, subtle yet unmistakable. Other species were watching. They were measuring humanity's strength, trying to understand what had allowed a small, hidden colony to strike with such precision. Humans did not care about numbers or size. They cared about determination, strategy, and justice, and that made them unpredictable. The first message arrived from the Krell Dominion, a powerful and cautious alien empire. Their envoy's words were diplomatic, polite yet unmistakably tense. "Humans," the transmission began, "your actions against the Zetherians have been noted. Consider this a warning. The galaxy is not yours to challenge lightly." Elias read the message aloud to his officers, then placed it gently on the command table. "They don't understand us," he said softly. "They never will." Across the colony, humans prepared for what would inevitably come next. Ships were refitted, engines calibrated, weapons upgraded. Every pilot, every engineer, every soldier trained with renewed focus. It was not pride that drove them, nor a desire for conquest. It was survival, yes, but more than that, it was the need to stand tall in a galaxy that had underestimated them for centuries. The Zetherians themselves were furious. Their pride wounded, their arrogance shattered. They sent fleets to investigate, only to be met by scattered human patrols that struck quickly, then vanished into the void. Humans were no longer passive observers. They were a storm that could not be predicted, a force that could not be tamed. And they had barely begun. Among the colonists there was a mix of fear and excitement. Children peeked from observation windows, wondering why adults were so busy, so tense. Scientists and strategists worked late into the night, planning for scenarios most could barely imagine. Humanity was small, fragile perhaps, yet the fire in their hearts made them immense. Every human knew this, though no one said it aloud. They didn't need to. Courage was understood without words. Elias held a private meeting with his senior officers. "The galaxy will test us," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Some will try to destroy us, others to control us. They will all underestimate us, at first. But they will learn. Humans do not forget. Humans do not surrender. And humans do not forgive when a debt is owed." His officers nodded. They understood the weight of history, the silent promise carried through generations. Humanity's patience was not weakness. It was a weapon honed over centuries. Late that night, Elias returned to the observation deck alone. The stars stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent, yet somehow alive with expectation. He thought of the ancestors who had whispered the oath of repayment, of the colonies destroyed, of the countless lives erased. Humanity had begun its long march across the stars, not as conquerors but as a reminder. Justice, courage, and the will to survive could reshape the galaxy. Somewhere far away, Zetherian commanders communicated in panic. The small human colony had become a legend overnight. Other species, too, began to reconsider how they had treated humanity. The galaxy, once indifferent, now felt a subtle tremor. Humans were not a species to be ignored. They were a force that, if provoked, could shake entire star systems. Elias watched the stars and whispered softly, almost as if speaking to the void itself. "The galaxy has been warned. We do not strike for power. We strike for those who cannot fight. But remember, the stars are listening, and one day they will shudder at the name of humanity." The quiet hum of Elysium 9 carried into the night, as the first true warning had been delivered. The galaxy was beginning to understand. Humans had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same again. Even in victory, the weight of battle pressed heavily on Elysium 9. The colony celebrated quietly, but for Captain Elias Vorn and his crew, the celebration was tempered by loss. Ships had returned damaged, lives had been sacrificed, and every victory carried the memory of the fallen. The first strikes had been swift, precise, and successful, but nothing could erase the cost. Elias walked through the medical bay, where wounded pilots and engineers lay in rows. Some were lightly injured, their laughter a relief, but others were silent, eyes closed, healing in body but not in spirit. Doctors worked tirelessly, but Elias knew that some wounds could not be stitched or bandaged. The pain of loss lingered in every corner of the colony, a quiet reminder of what had been risked. He stopped by the side of Lieutenant Mara Kellen, a pilot who had narrowly survived a direct strike on her fighter. Her hands shook slightly as she touched the memorial hollow of her crewmates who had not returned. "We did what we had to do," Elias said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You survived. That is proof that our courage matters." Mara nodded, but her eyes were heavy with memories she could not speak. In the hangar, engineers moved silently among the ships, repairing hulls and recalibrating weapons. Each tool strike, each spark of welding, was a small act of dedication to those who had fallen. Every ship repaired was a silent vow that humanity would continue, that the debt of justice could not be undone by casualties. The colonists worked with quiet determination, knowing that the survival of the few depended on the survival of all. Elias often found himself in the memorial chamber, staring at the flickering holograms of colonies destroyed long ago. He could feel the weight of their loss pressing down on him, but also the resolve that burned brighter than any star. Humans had survived centuries of indifference, ridicule, and outright destruction. They had survived because they remembered, because they cared, because they refused to bow. Every life lost today was honored. Every sacrifice became a part of their strength. Even in the quiet moments, Elias could hear the whispers of the dead. Names, places, memories, ghostly voices that reminded him of the cost of victory. He did not speak these names aloud. Instead, he let them guide his decisions, let them shape the humanity of every human who looked up at the stars and wondered if the galaxy would ever understand their will. Outside, children played beneath the glowing domes, their laughter a fragile but vital thread in the tapestry of hope. They could not yet grasp the depth of human struggle, the centuries of waiting or the lives lost to shape their freedom. But they sensed the courage and pride in the adults around them. Humanity had acted not for fame or conquest, but for memory, justice, and survival. That evening, Elias gathered the senior officers. The conversation was not about tactics or fleets. It was about purpose. "We have begun a long journey," he said, his voice steady, carrying both sorrow and hope. "Every life we save, every debt we repay, every star we reach, it is for those who cannot fight for themselves. Our victories are theirs. Our courage is theirs. And our memory is theirs." As night fell over Elysium 9, the stars shimmered in quiet approval, or perhaps they were merely witnesses. Elias stood alone on the observation deck, gazing at the infinite expanse. He felt the weight of humanity's history, the lives lost, and the sacrifices made. Yet in that weight was strength, a strength that would carry them across the galaxy, that would make enemies tremble and allies respect. Humanity had acted. They had begun to repay a debt centuries old, and even in the shadows of sorrow, Elias knew the truth. Courage, memory, and unbreakable will were humanity's weapons, stronger than any fleet or weapon ever created. Somewhere in the void, the stars seemed to pause, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy could feel the tremor of human determination. Elias whispered into the cold night air, almost as if speaking to those lost long ago. "We remember, we fight, and we will never, ever surrender." The galaxy held its breath. After the humans' swift victories, the Zytherian emperor had grown furious. His fleets, once proud and invincible, were shattered and humiliated. He called upon the remaining Zytherian forces, summoning every ship, every soldier, and every weapon to crush humanity once and for all. It was the final battle, the moment that would decide the fate of humanity in the stars. Captain Elias Vorn stood on the command deck of the flagship Liberty, watching the distant Zytherian armada assemble like a dark storm on the horizon. His officers were tense, but he felt calm. He had been through smaller battles, losses, and victories, and he had learned one truth. Courage and strategy could overcome even the greatest power. The humans were few, yes, but their spirit was unmatched. "This is it," Elias said softly, to his crew. "Every life we honor, every memory we carry, every promise we have made, all of it leads to this moment. Fight with your hearts. Fight for the past, the present, and the future." The crew nodded, their faces reflecting the same fire that burned in Elias's chest. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting for justice, for survival, and for the memory of the fallen. The battle began in a blaze of light and sound. Energy beams tore through the nebula surrounding the Zetherian fleet. Explosions painted the darkness with orange and red, while human ships moved with deadly precision. Pilots dodged, struck, and vanished into warp shadows, striking where no enemy expected. Every maneuver was calculated, every shot purposeful. Elias personally led a squadron to confront the Zetherian Emperor's flagship. The massive ship loomed ahead, shields humming, weapons ready to obliterate anything approaching. But the humans were not afraid. They had learned patience, strategy, and the power of unity. Elias's fighter darted through laser fire, weaving, between volleys with skill born of decades of preparation. Inside the Emperor's flagship, chaos erupted. Zetherian officers barked orders, but human attacks came from every angle. Shields faltered, weapons misfired, and panic spread. Elias's squadron worked as one, coordinating silently, anticipating every move. The humans were not just fighters. They were the embodiment of centuries of determination, revenge, and courage. Finally, Elias reached the Emperor's ship alone. The duel was tense and deadly. He felt the weight of every lost colony, every fallen human, and every promise whispered across generations. With a final, precise strike, the Emperor's flagship exploded in a shower of sparks, metal, and fire, leaving the rest of the Zetherian fleet in stunned retreat. The galaxy had witnessed something it would never forget. A small human force had toppled an empire thought untouchable. When the battle ended, Elias returned to Elysium 9, battered but alive. The cost had been high, yet the result was undeniable. Humanity had proven its strength, courage, and unbreakable will. The Zetherians had no choice but to surrender, their pride shattered, their fleets broken, and their arrogance forever humbled. On the observation deck, Elias gazed at the stars, their light reflecting the chaos and victory alike. He thought of the generations who had waited, the families who had vanished, and the children now safe under the domes of Elysium 9. Humanity had not only repaid a debt, it had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of courage. Officers and colonists celebrated quietly, mindful of the lives lost and the sacrifices made. Yet amidst the joy, Elias felt a solemn pride. Humans were small, fragile in numbers, but their spirit was indomitable. They were proof that no empire, no weapon, no force could crush the will of a people who refused to forget, refused to surrender, and refused to be controlled. That night, as the stars stretched endlessly above, Elias whispered to the galaxy, a voice both soft and commanding, "We are humans. We repay debts. We honor the fallen, and we will never bow. The stars will remember us, and they will shudder at what humanity can do." The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was no longer a quiet observer. Humanity was a force, unstoppable and relentless, carrying centuries of memory, courage, and unbreakable will across the stars. The battle was over, but the galaxy had not yet recovered. The Zetherians were defeated, their fleets shattered, and their emperor's arrogance destroyed. Across the stars, whispers spread quickly. Humans were not weak, humans were not to be ignored, and humans were capable of unimaginable courage. Humanity had repaid a debt centuries old, and the universe would remember. Captain Elias Vorn stood on the observation deck of Elysium 9, gazing out at the endless sky. The stars shimmered like silent witnesses to everything that had happened. Victory had been won, but it was not a victory of conquest. It was a victory of memory, of courage, and of justice. Every human who had lived, every colony destroyed, every sacrifice made, it was all honored in the triumph that now stretched across the void. The colony was alive with quiet celebration. Children played beneath the glowing domes, laughing freely, for the first time in generations, unaware of the depth of history that had led to this moment. Scientists and engineers repaired ships, fine-tuned weapons, and studied alien technology captured during the final battle. But amidst the excitement, there was reflection, a solemn understanding of the cost. Human lives had been risked, lives had been lost, yet humanity had endured, stronger and wiser than ever. Elias walked among the colonists, his heart heavy with emotion. He stopped to speak to a young pilot who had returned from the battle with scars on his face but fire in his eyes. "You did well," Elias said softly. "You fought not just for us but for every human who came before. Remember that. Carry it with pride." The young pilot nodded, tears in his eyes. He understood, as all humans did, that their courage was more than strength. It was legacy. Beyond Elysium 9, alien civilizations began to take notice. Messages arrived, not of threat, but of respect and caution. Some empires sent envoys seeking peace. Others quietly restructured their fleets to avoid confrontation with a species now feared across the galaxy. Humans had become more than just survivors. They had become legends. The stars themselves seemed to shudder at the thought of what a united human race could accomplish when pushed to action. In the memorial chamber, holograms of lost colonies flickered softly. Elias stood before them, placing his hand on one projection. He whispered the names of the fallen, the innocent, the brave. Humanity had not forgotten them. Humanity never forgot. That memory, that unyielding spirit, was the true power that had shaken the Zetherians and the galaxy alike. It was not weapons or ships, but courage, unity, and remembrance that made humans unstoppable. That night, Elias returned to the observation deck, alone. The stars stretched endlessly, a canvas of infinite possibilities. He thought of every human who had ever lived, every life taken unjustly, every promise whispered across centuries. Humanity had acted. They had repaid a debt that no one else could. And in doing so, they had sent a clear message. Humans could not be controlled, humiliated, or ignored. He raised his hand almost in a silent salute to the galaxy itself and spoke softly. "We are humans. We honor the past. We fight for the present. And we shape the future. The galaxy will remember our courage. And one day, the stars themselves will shudder at the will of humanity." From the distant void, across countless light years, echoes of human resolve seemed to ripple through the universe. Civilizations that had once mocked or ignored humanity now watched with respect, fear, and wonder. The galaxy had been forever changed. A small, determined species had risen, not with tyranny but with courage, justice, and unbreakable will. On Elysium 9, the colonists looked up at the sky, some in awe, some in quiet pride, and some simply smiling at the freedom they now felt. Humanity had survived. Humanity had endured. Humanity had risen. And the stars, vast and infinite, trembled in silence at the power of one simple truth. When humans act, the universe must listen.